As a younger person, I almost exclusively played the same 10 or so NES games over and over again. I eventually started ramping up my collecting efforts to find other awesome gaming experiences, and unsurprisingly, more than any other system so far, the NES has brought me some of my favorite new-to-me experiences in retro gaming. Here, I'd like to showcase 9 titles that I absolutely loved for many different reasons, and the only qualifier for this list is that I've only experienced them as an adult. I'm curious to hear which of these you've played, or which other NES games you think I might like based on my feelings about these ones. The Guardian Legend is a top-down adventure game with some vertical shoot-'em-up sections that ended up being way more fun than I was anticipating. I was always pretty keen on the overhead parts where you're walking around fighting otherworldly monsters and exploring the compound, but the shooter section spooked me a little bit. I can't say I've ever really indulged in these kinds of games very often, and the fact that you must frequently transform into a tiny ship and survive the ordeal to keep progressing made me wonder if I'd even be able to get through the game at all. Surprisingly though, I actually started looking forward to these stretches. They supplemented the exploration really well by infusing a refreshing change of pace into the gameplay. The story goes that an alien race has sent over a monster-filled world called Naju in an attempt to destroy Earth, and as the guardian of the planet, your mission is to intercept it before it's too late. Thankfully, the actual game world doesn't feel as enormous as an entire alien planet as it's shown in the manual here. What's neat about the Guardian Legend is that you can proceed through the motions of the game in almost any order you like, so long as you're skilled and strong enough to push through the troubles each area brings with it. Imagine dropping into Dungeon 8 in The Legend of Zelda with 3 hearts and the wooden sword. Some people could do it, but many of us wouldn't want to. Having so much freedom starting out might be overwhelming for some. There's no real finger to point you in any one direction, but it didn't take me long to pick up on a couple of hints and start formulating a plan. Wandering around the top-down sections while blowing up blocks and aliens galore will reveal a bunch of different things like permanent upgrades for attack and defense, as well as health and firepower refills. I was shocked at the sheer volume of this stuff scattered around because it made the exploration feel valuable. Discovering items that were actually useful made the tedium of blowing up every last block feel satisfying, and being rewarded for thoroughness so regularly made me feel excited about how my character would advance next. I also thought the difficulty was extremely well paced in these top-down areas. It scaled almost perfectly to the number of health refills I was finding, with a couple of inevitable spikes to bolster my vigilance. And anytime something felt too tough, I never felt too frustrated knowing that I could always retreat and try another area of the labyrinth for size instead. Each of the shooter sections I mentioned earlier can be found beyond these entrances to the corridors. Some of them require a little sleuthing to unlock, but I liked this a lot. It was fitting that you couldn't just barge into the inner depths of an alien operation with guns a-blazing and win the day. You had to play their games first to gain access, and some of the little puzzles were really cleverly done. At the very least, stopping to think once in a while gave me some great moments of pause among the non-stop action. Once you crack the code to get inside, you're launched straight into the fray and tasked with destroying everything in sight until you face off with the master monster at the end. Winning these fights usually supplied a key to open up a new area or some much sought after upgrades to keep building up the main character's stats. Even though I was initially skeptical about the shooter sections, I ended up loving them and all of the chaos that they bring. I felt like the game nudged me out of my comfort zone, forcing me to conjure up new strategies as I got my hands on new weapons, and most of the time there were just enough health pickups to stave off death. That's not to say that I didn't get steamrolled regularly, but I was pleasantly surprised at how well I got on with these parts. If I had to complain about one thing, it's the sound effects. Your gun and other weapons cause a pinging sound when you're attacking, and it drowned out what's easily one of the best soundtracks on the NES. If that's the only major problem this game has, that's a good thing. I remember being absolutely obsessed with Darkwing Duck as a kid, but trying to think back on that time in my life, I barely remember anything about the show or its cast of characters. I do know that if I'd been aware of a game based on it back then, I would have begged for a copy to play. Better late than never, I guess. You play as the Webbed Wonder as he attempts to combat a crime surge in the city. The usual suspects from the Fowl organization have orchestrated a number of robberies throughout St. Canard, and it's Darkwing's job to retrieve all of the stolen items and put an end to the villainy. He's armed with his signature gas gun, but along with its standard effects are a couple of upgrades to try out, compliments of Launchpad's handiwork. When looking at the game as a whole, some standout aspects here are the wonderful soundtrack and the precise controls. I thoroughly enjoyed how predictable and fluid the character movement was, but all of that was amplified even further by the smart level design. Each stage is fairly elaborate and in many ways surpassed my expectations of a conventional platformer. You have plenty of the usual jumping to do, but there are also lots of instances where the environment can be interacted with to continue through the stage. These additions were more than just another step on the way to the end of a level, with some acting as switches to turn lights on and off or activate moving platforms to get you a little further in. This totally transformed what would have been a run-of-the-mill experience into something much more compelling. This interactivity was even useful in diversifying enemy combat. While the game does provide quite a few offensive options in those gas gun upgrades I mentioned earlier, I loved the fact that I wasn't stuck solely relying on firepower to get the upper hand in combat. When staring down an adversary with very little room to maneuver away from them, I just used what was around me for help, like grabbing onto a ledge above me to dodge an attack instead. It was awesome having choice in how I approached these situations, and having successes fostered a real sense of mastery that I really didn't get from other similar titles. The stages even flowed better because of these features too. My one complaint is how frequently enemies respawn if you back up too far, but even that wasn't even much of a problem since I had plenty of ways to manage them as many times as they came back to life. There is a bit of replay value here in tracking down some secrets, but honestly, the only bad thing about this game is that there aren't more stages to play. With only just over a handful to work through, the quest to squash crime is far too short and left me wanting more. Kid Icarus is a game that I never thought I'd be able to beat when I first tried playing it many years ago. I seemed to be permanently stuck in the first set of stages, climbing dauntlessly toward failure after failure, vying for whatever was beyond to no avail. You play as Pit, a prisoner who's attempting to escape the underworld in order to save the captured goddess Palutena. To do this, he needs to find the 3 sacred treasures and overthrow Medusa, who's launched Angel Land into a time of darkness under her reign. Before I even touch on the gameplay, I have to take a moment to gush about the manual here. I love it. It's full of gorgeous artwork, it has a well fleshed out rendition of the story, and it also has a great supply of useful information about people, places, and items you'll encounter throughout the adventure. Compared to other game manuals from around the same time, in terms of its quality, it's head and shoulders above many of them. It's at least as good as some of my other favorites like The Legend of Zelda's or Faxanadu's. Anyway, on the surface, Kid Icarus appears to be a fairly bland action game, but it's actually a lot more than that. There are quite a few things going on behind the scenes, like an invisible experience system, some secrets around shopping, as well as some excellent upgrades to acquire if you jump through all of the appropriate hoops along the way. Once I realized that this game had more depth than what initially meets the eye, I was hooked on pressing through the tough bits to get to the good stuff. This game's actually quite top-heavy in terms of its difficulty. It gets easier the further you get into it, and I attribute this to a couple of things. You get more health as you wrap up each area, and the further you get, the more opportunity you have to buy helpful items and upgrade your offense and defense. The slate of enemies doesn't really change all that much. You're just more prepared to take on what's thrown at you deeper into the adventure. Most of the game is spent platforming through vertical and horizontal stages while fighting off a constant flow of enemies. I enjoyed the challenge of these parts with their very demanding jumps while teetering over the looming instant death pit that is the bottom of the screen. Things felt pretty frustrating until I got my hands on the first weapon upgrade, which improved the range from whatever this wienery distance is to clear across the screen. I felt more and more confident every time I ducked into a doorway, and as I accumulated more money to buy health refills, I truly got a handle on what was expected of me. The first time I hit a side-scrolling stage and was met by one of the catchiest songs in the entire game, the stress of the first area's climb melted away almost completely. While the scrolling levels were engaging in their own way, what really impressed me were the dungeons. Every 4th stage was a huge maze-like endeavor requiring graph paper and a lot of patience to plot out while exploring. I really enjoyed how tough these were. They were packed full of shenanigans with their one-way routes and tight spaces to work through. My absolute favorite, though, were the eggplant wizards that would just suddenly be in your face out of nowhere. Getting transformed into a helpless eggplant-bodied person and wandering around trying to find the nurse actually cracked me up. I imagine many people probably find this obnoxious, but to me, these encounters were so unexpected that they created an enormous sense of tension in me for the better. They were by far some of the best jump scare fodder I've experienced in an NES game, apart from seeing Jason's name in the bottom of the screen in the cabins in Friday the 13th. You might be surprised to learn that Little Nemo the Dream Master is one of a small handful of games that actually made me rage quit. The auto-scrolling train section is completely to blame for that, but coming back to it over a decade after the fact, I found myself falling in love with everything about it. You venture out as Nemo as he travels through the land of dreams where everything is a complete mess. The King of Slumberland is missing, and it's up to you, armed only with a never-ending supply of candies, to restore peace to the realm. The stages here sprawl both horizontally and vertically, with the main goal in each being to find enough keys to open a door at the end. Each area is cleverly designed around the abilities of several different creatures that Nemo can commandeer through coercion. It does get a little weird in the instances where he physically wears the skin of his friends to channel their skills, but I digress. Once he's become one with them, he can fly, climb walls, or dig underground to reach new places on the search for the keys and other power-ups. One of my favorite aspects here was the leave no stone unturned mentality of every level. There's a lot of ground to cover, with each stage being big enough to feel non-linear, but not so big that you'd ever run the risk of getting lost. Seeing things just out of reach, like a platform above me or a huge wall standing between me and a key, was motivating to figure out how to get there. The game always provides you with a couple of options to try, but how you inevitably decide to go about things is entirely up to you in the end. I personally liked finding a friendly pal and experimenting to see what worked and what didn't, and with unlimited continues to burn through, I had lots of opportunity to refine my approach. The other significant aspect of this game that I adored was the atmosphere supplied by both the graphics and the incredible soundtrack. There's not a single place in this game that's devoid of character and charm. Feeling teleported to this fantasy land with all its imaginary monsters and backdrops was effortless, making for an enchanting experience from start to finish. Even further still, I appreciated how much the gameplay felt like a solid departure from the usual platformer formula of running to the right towards a goal. While it does have its fair share of difficult sections, that was just an excuse to keep playing the game for a little while longer. Wizards and Warriors is an adventure platformer where you take up the role of the brave knight Kyros. He's on a mission to rescue a princess who's being held at Castle Ironspire by a nefarious wizard named Malkil, and the adventure takes you through many climbs and falls on the way to find her. A really nice touch is that you're shown how all of the stages connect in this map that regularly turns up, except it's not just for looks, it's actually accurate. The level layouts here translate to how the stages are arranged in reality, like needing to ascend to the treetops in this one section, or having to dive deep into the caves over here. I appreciated this attention to detail, and the little preview of what was coming up. On the surface, Wizards and Warriors might seem like a pretty average time at first. Your character's a generic-looking knight with a wild jump that's hard to control, but there's lots to dig into after you learn to steer him. The way this game plays is that each big area has a couple of subsections you'll have to search through for gems in order to pay off a gatekeeper blocking the way to the next room. At first, it's pretty easy to find what you need and move on, but the more you play, the longer and more complex the stages get. You'll also need to seek out keys for locked doors, but even after opening them, those rooms might not even have what you're looking for. Exploration's the foundation that everything else in this adventure builds on, and it's very fun spending time working across giant levels trying to find new territory or secrets. The way is overflowing with enemies and countless jumps that, when missed, might just send you all the way back down to the bottom to try again if you aren't careful. What deepened my love for this game even further was its extremely light dusting of RPG elements. It has one of the largest and most diverse inventories I've seen in a game like this, as well as a couple of armor and equipment upgrades too. While some items you find are necessary to advance, others give you some freedom to tailor your playthrough to your own style. The one drawback is that everything you can equip comes out of a chest, with some items automatically replacing others you're holding, injecting an element of risk to opening strange new chests. My favorite was the Dagger of Throwing for a little bit of offensive range, but I love the idea of having the option to try a different approach in a subsequent playthrough. Anything that bolsters replay value potential is good in my books. Wizards and Warriors could have easily been one of the hardest games I've played if it hadn't been for its unlimited continues and generosity when you bite the dust. It respawns you right back in the exact same spot that you perished, helping the game feel like it's always moving forward. It is tough at times, but definitely achievable for anyone with a little patience. River City Ransom accomplished something I didn't even think was possible by combining one of my favorite genres with another I've never really been able to get into: beat 'em ups. There's something that just does not compute with me when there are combos to remember, as well as complex stuff like juggling crowd control in later stages. Even still, the idea of this game intrigued me, to put it lightly. You play as a high school student that just happened to miss school on the one day it was overtaken by a local gang. It's up to you to rescue everyone being held captive there, including your girlfriend. And to do this, you'll have to work your way across town through many gang-infested areas, dodging death around every corner. While it did take me a while to get the hang of the fighting, after it clicked, River City Ransom became a lot of fun. There's a huge selection of moves that you can perform with your own fists and feet, but you can also pick up weapons lying around. The manual goes over many of these in quite a bit of detail, setting you up with everything you need to know to get started. This was really reassuring to me as a relative newcomer to the genre, but there's a lot more to this game than just dishing out some beatings. To progress through the game, you have to raise your character's stats in order to take on more ferocious gang members. You don't gain experience here like you would in a more formal RPG affair, and instead you have to buy your upgrades in the form of food and other useful items. All of the shopping's done at these little mall interludes, which I absolutely adored. They were one of the few spots in the game where you weren't getting hammered on by jerks every moment, but they're also interesting to explore. The items you buy either temporarily or permanently boost an attribute, and there were quite a few different restaurants and shops to pop into with different menus to try. In some cases, the food items were so good that my little dude even ate the dishes they came on. There was clearly a lot of love and consideration poured into this game and its details, and I enjoyed drinking it all in. While I liked this stat system, one glaring flaw in a first playthrough is not knowing what any of the purchasable items actually do. I actually ended up using a guide to sidestep some of the guesswork, which consequently made the experience a lot more fun. Once I got some good numbers under my belt, the rest of the adventure felt like a breeze, and I'm glad that there's another difficulty setting to try again someday. While there's also the obvious benefit of being able to play this with a friend for some co-op fun, I thoroughly enjoyed this game as a solo effort. It had an enormous sense of humor, some quirky storytelling, and a very engaging combat system once I stopped fumbling with the controls. It's definitely worth taking up the task of saving River City. The first time I saw gameplay of Xexyz, I was instantly curious to see if it was anything like other side-scrolling action-adventure games that I'm so fond of. It has shops to buy weapon upgrades, mini-games to play, NPCs to chat with, and a neat story that unfolds around a fellow named Apollo who's rising up against the oppression of an invading alien race. The goal here is to track down 5 captured queens and a missing princess to restore peace to the nation of Xexyz. There are 2 main game modes afoot here: the platforming sections where you can speak with NPCs for hints or equipment, and the horizontal shooter stretches you travel through between stages to progress the game. I enjoyed the shoot 'em up bits because they were not only brief, but also fairly easy for someone like me that doesn't dabble much in this genre. They didn't quite fall under the umbrella of mindless mashing either, since there are some mysteries to solve with a couple of branching paths. You'll regularly come to a set of 2 doors where one of them forces you to repeat the section you just flew through, while the other brings you forward. If I guessed wrong, I didn't mind backtracking, and would seize the opportunity to build up some gunpowder and some speed. This feature was especially nice after dying. The platforming parts were by far my favorite. I loved how much exploration was involved here, especially as later levels gradually expanded out in all directions. They required a discerning eye and a lot of resilience to effectively search for the path forward. I personally never found myself lost or needing to draw out a map, but what's great is that the rooms are organized in such a way that would make them very easy to plot out if need be. I was also pleasantly surprised by the amount of NPC interaction that you have here. I savored talking to characters inside each of the chambers, playing the minigames as they came up, and occasionally chatting with a lovely lady in a bathtub for a change of scenery. While it's certainly not the most polished game on this list, it's definitely a memorable experience. It seamlessly combined two genres, as well as creating space for repeat playthroughs down the line with all of the options available in weapons and other power-ups. I grew up as a longtime fan of Adventure Island 2 and was absolutely floored when I learned that Adventure Island 3 existed. More adorable dinosaur friend action and a Master Higgins that can actually duck? Sign me up! You play as Master Higgins on a quest through 8 areas to rescue Genie Jungle after she's abducted by aliens. If you've played other Adventure Island games, this probably seems pretty familiar. It's pure platforming through and through, and comes with the expectations of precision jumping and memorization to make it through the many stages. What's great is that it also caters to your well-being a lot more than the first 2 installments in this series do. And in general, Adventure Island 3 expanded upon everything I loved about the second game, but additionally loaded on bells and whistles to make the tried-and-true formula feel fresh again. For example, there are way more secrets to uncover this time around, some of which grant you access to bonus stages. You can still hop on springs to collect fruit and dinosaur pals like you could in the earlier games, but here you can also go surfing. Unfortunately, for the life of me, no matter how hard I tried, I could never make it to the second wave. There's some kind of control trickery going on here that I just couldn't seem to get a handle on, but it's cool that the option was there. Other bonus rooms are stuffed with extra dinosaurs, weapons, and exclusive power-ups like the crystal. Adventure Island 3 also comes with an unlimited inventory, a dream come true for me. This was a fantastic change from the second game where the inventory was capped at 9 of each item. Being able to stock up gave me a much needed advantage in the later stages where I needed the extra weapons or wanted to be able to take an extra hit by bringing a dinosaur with me, just in case. I don't think that this took away from the challenge of the game at all. The level design and enemy placement does enough on its own to make the back half of the game tough to muddle through. Another feature that I really liked is how you get extra lives. You're no longer subject to the will and whim of the choose an egg rounds. Extra lives can still be gained with points, but another much easier way is collecting 100 fruit. The fact that you're not totally bound to random chance for free lives makes each of the unlimited continues last a bit longer. There are also some alternative level paths, so the game is never the same twice. If you can find them, that is. Now, I could go on all day long about how cute the dinosaurs are and how much I feel they bring to the game, but I think it's better to say that this experience was a wonderful way for me to enjoy an old favorite, just like it was brand new again. If you don't mind honing your platforming craft to near perfection, this is a great game to play. Vice Project Doom is a phenomenal platformer that I wish I'd encountered earlier in life. It has a really cool backstory set in a futuristic world where aliens live among humans. You play as a Vice officer named Quinn who's seeking out the producers of a mysterious gel. It was initially manufactured to keep the aliens alive, but its harmfulness to humans is being exploited, and it's your job to figure out what's going on. While Vice Project Doom is primarily a platformer at heart, there are also a couple of other game modes like top-down driving or first-person shooting. I liked these sections well enough, but where the adventure really shines brightly is in its side-scrolling stages. The setting here is gritty and dark with some amazing graphics to feast upon. I especially loved the stage where you're fighting on top of a train with the mountains whipping by in the background. You visit the same kinds of locations that you would in other games, but these have an almost supernatural quality, adding a ton of ambience that I didn't expect. This is a very high-energy game where the fun never stops, requiring some quick reflexes and constant attention to survive. Controlling the main character feels fantastic, and you'll never feel sluggish in responding to the seemingly endless flow of assaults coming at you. I'd say that character control fidelity here is some of the best on the NES, with snappy controls that feel good in all the right ways. You have options to play your attacks close or from a safer distance depending on your preferences. Like many other fast-paced games, learning enemy spawn points and patterns is essential for getting good, and Vice Project Doom was no different. Another aspect I really enjoyed were the several doses of story to take in beyond the initial introduction. Between some stages, you'll be treated to some updates from your team, as well as occasional clashes with danger. Even though the story wasn't the most cohesive one out there, it was still amazing to see such wonderful artwork and a valiant attempt at writing in an action game. Along with all the other parts I've mentioned here, the story ties everything together into a complete package that I dare say is a top-tier NES experience. Like some of the other games on this list, Vice Project Doom is fleeting with its short length, but with enough perseverance, winning is guaranteed with unlimited continues on your side. Don't pass this one up. I hope you enjoyed this trip down memory lane with me. And just for fun, here are a handful of other games that I thoroughly enjoyed on the NES but haven't yet had the chance to review. Let me know which one of these you'd like to see a full video on, and throw me your best NES recommendations in the comments. Thanks so much for watching.